League of the United States. Please rise for the presentation of colors and the singing of the national anthem. Advance the colors. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Out, shoulder, out. Retire the colors. You may be seated. At this time, please welcome Alan Kaplan, the 49th President of the Navy League of the United States.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all here. Welcome to the official grand opening of our 2018 Sea Airspace. For 53 years, this event has fostered education and collaboration in the global maritime community. This year is one of learning, competing, and winning, not only for the Navy League, but also for our sea services. We have raised the bar and are delivering the biggest and best show in Navy League history. We are also elevating our Navy League mission to new heights in support of our sea services and their families. This year, we have a record number of international delegations and new excitement planned, showcasing new panels, receptions, luncheons, and a brand new maritime gala. We have phenomenal education sessions planned on the most advanced and relevant topics facing our sea services today. We are also proud to host, for the first time, a Sea Service Spouse panel and reception, where we will honor and recognize our Sea Service spouses for their service and sacrifice. Events like these cannot happen without the help of our sponsors. Thank you to our 4-star sponsors, Huntington Ingalls, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. Also, thank you to our 2-star sponsors, BAE Systems, BWX Technologies, CACI, and Orbital ATK. It is with their ongoing support that our sea airspace community can continue to grow. In the coming days, the importance of this year's theme, Learn, Compete, Win, will grow more and more evident. We will meet new people, forge new friendships, create new business opportunities, and walk away with more knowledge than we have right now. Let's harness this energy and excitement during our 3 days here together. Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all another fantastic year at Sea Airspace. We are one team, mission-focused. I would now like to invite our Executive Director, Jim Bruns, and all the members of our Board of Directors up on the stage to join me in officially opening the 2018 Sea Airspace Exposition.
Let's officially begin the 53rd Sea Airspace. Recover the ribbon. And cut the ribbon. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, would you be as kind as to give a rousing ovation for this wonderful group of musicians, the United States Navy Brass Quintet. This concludes our opening ceremonies, and we look forward to our first session. Have a great day.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to everybody in the room here and everybody joining us watching around the world on the live stream on defenseone.com. A lot has changed in the year since we last met here. We have a new national security strategy with a new emphasis on great power competition and new concept of deterrence. As of today, there is a new national security advisor in the White House helping the president sort through options. There's a 2018 budget with the plus up and broad strokes agreement for 2019, which shouldn't really be this much of a relief in April, but here we are. ISIS has largely been beaten down, but U.S. forces remain engaged in combat in a half dozen conflicts. They're perennial missions, of course. There's presence, deterrence, engagement, training, logistics, the gathering of intelligence. China and Russia are no less eager to rewrite the international order, to reduce U.S. influence, to drive wedges between America and its friends and allies. The Arctic is still melting, the seas are still rising, machines are getting smarter. The signals and policies and tweets coming out of the White House have everyone guessing. And so we're fortunate to have with us today senior members of the Sea Services to tell us how they're grappling with all this. And we're going to start our discussion today by asking each of our panelists to frame their services' priorities and challenges for the year ahead. Then we'll keep the discussion going with some questions from up here, and then we will open up to your questions from the floor. So get those questions ready. When it's time, find the people with the microphones, and please introduce yourself, and please keep your questions short, and we will get to as many of them as we can. General Walters, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. Pleasure to be here. I'll give you our priorities in a minute, but I want you to know that obviously resources are what's going to drive us achieving our ability to deter and take on near-peer competitors, particularly in specific for the Marine Corps. But there is a Colonel Sutherland, Royal Marines, in the audience somewhere, I believe. Don't have to raise your hand. Thank you. I just want to remind you that reparations night, you signed a voucher for $23.4 trillion to the Marine Corps, and that goes a long way to get us to where we need to go. The Marine Corps is a very people-centric organization. About 60% of our budget goes to our Marines. We are viewing how we recruit, who we retain, and how we talent manage our way out of our challenges, particularly when you talk cyber, EW, those things that don't have a box around them, but are going to be critical in fighting a near-peer competitor, as you can see in daily life. So we're going to seek those kinds of people. We also note that the last assessment that came out of the Joint Recruiting survey was that only 29% of American youth have the ability to serve in our armed services. So that's going to be a challenge, and we're going to see how we can incentivize those who can serve to serve. But as far as our focus as the contact and blunt force in the lexicon of the National Defense Strategy, we're going to seek to be able to operate command and control in degraded environments across the board. We're going to We're very interested in artificial intelligence and how that can help us close our kill chains, both for us and the Joint Force. Now we can integrate that in the network. And obviously, we want long-range fires, and we're really looking at our supply chain because of the distances in the Pacific and looking at additive manufacturing. We have some very innovative young Marines right now, and they're taking advantage of that right now. And if I have to ask the question, I can give you some detail on that. With that, I look forward to your questions. Thanks, Brad.
All right, thanks, General. Admiral Michelle?
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to be with you here this morning. Big year for the Coast Guard. This is a transition year for the United States Coast Guard, and almost our entire senior leadership team is going to swap out here on June the 1st for our Commandant. And our new Commandant is going to be Vice Admiral Carl Schultz, who's currently our Atlantic Area Commander. He's going to take over as Commandant. And my relief may actually be in the audience, Vice Admiral Charlie Ray, who will take over as Vice Commandant as I head down to my home state of Florida and enjoy some sunshine on the way down there. But Coast Guard has been on 4 strategic focus areas since Admiral Zukunft has taken over: Western Hemisphere, Arctic, cyber, energy, and the marine transportation system. And those remain incredibly relevant and has been a time of change over the past 4 years. In the Western Hemisphere, the good news is record cocaine seizures, record number of detainees trying to smuggle cocaine and other illicit products in the United States. Bad news is record flow rates, which lead to those record seizures. So it's a tough world here in the Western Hemisphere, and you've got some pretty regional instability down there in Central America and Mexico, which drives domestic politics and different things, large part due to transnational criminal organizations. And the United States Coast Guard is all over that problem set. We're bringing great capability into the fight down there. National Security Cutter, best ship we've ever fielded by far, and it's paying tremendous results we have down there. We look forward also to the Offshore Patrol Cutter, which is going to be constructed in my home state of Florida there in Panama City. And we're looking forward to getting that class underway and bringing that into the fight. In the world of the Arctic, I'll actually be moderating the Arctic panel, and we'll dig into detail on some of the things that are happening there. But world of dynamic change, as mentioned before, great changes in the national security framework, the navigation framework, the commercial framework, the environmental protection framework, the communications framework, the search and rescue framework, and a whole bunch of other things which are happening up in the Arctic. We have good news in the Arctic in that the Coast Guard has now gotten the second slug of money. Actually, it's gone into the Navy shipbuilding account, the second slug of money for the construction of the first of our heavy polar icebreakers, which ultimately will be a fleet of 3 heavy polar icebreakers and 1 medium icebreaker, and we're very much looking forward to building that class of ship. We also transitioned the Arctic Coast Guard Forum for the first time to another nation. That transitioned over to the nation of Finland, and they just had the meeting here within the past couple months, and that is alive and well, the Arctic Coast Guard Forum. In the world of cyber, the Coast Guard has its own cyber command, but for the first time has assigned a specific flag officer to command our Coast Guard Cyber Command. Prior to that, it was dual-hatted with our 6. Given the increasing relevance in cyber, we decided to put a flag officer full-time into the Coast Guard Cyber Command, and lots of things happening in the world of cyber. Lastly, in the world of energy and the marine transportation system, our marine transportation system has never been more relevant, and it grows every single day, whether it's the expanded Panama Canal, the fact that the United States is now a net exporter of natural gas, big deal there, and is projected to be a net exporter of energy products, by the beginning of the next decade. And almost all of that is going to move by water, unless it's going to Canada or Mexico. And the United States Coast Guard is right in the middle of that. We got some great news in our marine transportation system, and that Congress put the first big slug of money for the recapitalization of our Waterways Commerce Cutter. Those are our little inland river tenders, which make sure that all those waterways are open. The average age on that fleet is 52 years old, and some of those ships are well into their 70s. Congress has finally decided to recapitalize that fleet, and we're very much looking forward to that. And then the last piece on this is we anticipate that the next Commandant is going to sign our first ever maritime commerce strategy to support our other strategic efforts when he takes the chair. So with that, I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Admiral Michelle. Admiral Busby?
Morning. Morning, everybody. Thank you. Good to be with you here this morning. I've been in the job just about almost exactly 8 months. Actually, yesterday was 8 months as the administrator. And it's been a very busy 8 months. And I love being in the job. It's all about ships and sailors, which is what I've been associated with my entire life, so this is a kind of a dream job for me. The things that have emerged immediately to me in these last 8 months or so is the criticality of where we are in the United States Merchant Marine today, the U.S. flag Merchant Marine. We are right at the ragged edge of being able to support our wartime mission of supporting the sea lift for this nation. And it's a mission that I do for Transcom, provide the shipping, but more importantly, the people. Right now, I reported to Congress a month or two ago that we believe we are about 1,800 mariners short of being able to provide a consistent, sustainable sea lift should we have a full dust-up and have to mobilize all of our sea lift forces. And by that I mean our regular commercial merchant marine that's sailing every day, our sea lift ships that we keep in readiness status, the 46 that I maintain at MARAD, the 15 that Admiral Mewborn maintains at Military Sea Lift Command, our pre-positioned forces, and our 100 large Jones Act ships. In order to keep all of those manned and operational, we believe we're about 1,800 people short right now if we had to do any kind of a lengthy sea lift. That's a significant issue. That's something that definitely has General McDew out of Transcom's attention. It's got CNO's attention. Clearly it's got Secretary Chow's attention, and obviously it's got my attention. How do we fix that? How do we grow 1,800 people? Well, as I testified before Congress, and many of you in this room know or should know, it's part of an equation. To get the people, you have to have ships for them to sail on and to be employed in. And for you to have ships sailing, you have to have cargo to carry. As the Vice Commandant just said, we've got some good potential coming ahead, some cargo that's going to be coming into our lap, petroleum, energy, that is cargo that we can put ships against to carry if we choose to put the laws on the books and the legislation there. Representative Garamundi has done just such a thing. He has a proposal out there that would require between 15 and 30% of that energy to be transported on U.S. flagged ships. Right now they wouldn't be on U.S. built ships because we don't have LNG tankers, for instance, but that would be something that we would potentially grow into. We believe that we're about 40 to 45 ships short of where we need to be in this country to support those 1,800 to 2,000 more mariners in order for us to guarantee that we can do that sea lift mission. So there's a lot at play. The Jones Act, you hear a lot of people talking about the Jones Act. I mentioned the number 100. There's 100 large Jones Act ships that require unlimited tonnage mariners, unlimited horsepower engineers, which literally represents the largest group of ships that maintain, that have those people sailing for them. So you take away the Jones Act, you've just taken away the majority of jobs for our U.S. mariners in peacetime that we need in wartime. So it's very interconnected. As I said, gotten into this job, it has become very apparent to me that education is my #1 mission, is to educating people, not just folks like you sitting in this room, but well beyond as to how all this connects. Just getting rid of the Jones Act because it's a little expensive in some areas does not think through all of the other ramifications that it has on our warfighting capability. The ability to take the Army from our shores to wherever it needs to go in this world, and to sustain the Navy and sustain the Marine Corps once we get into a prolonged action. So it's critical in peacetime for us to be there in wartime. That's why our flag says "in peace and war" on it. They're required at both sides to make things happen. So a lot on our plate. Other nice thing is we're going to be building a new ship ourselves. We didn't get left out of the budget. We're going to be building a brand new purpose-built training ship, the first one in our nation's history that's going to be purpose-built for training. Beautiful ship, national security, a multi-mission vessel. We're going to be going out with an RFP, hopefully here in a not too distant future, and we look forward to working with industry to come up with a good procurement strategy and plan, which will get those ships out of here very, very soon, and we're excited about that. So as I walk around the floor in the exhibition hall, those of you that are in the shipbuilding industry, let's talk, make me a deal. With that, thank you very much. Look forward to being with you.
Great, Admiral, thanks. And Admiral Mers.
Yeah, thank you. Talk to me too. First, I'd like to thank the Navy League for putting on the Sea, Air, and Space Symposium. As the OPNAV lead organization to coordinate this, I literally didn't have to lift a finger as the team rallied around and put this together, which I think is the biggest symposium they've done. So congratulations to them. Also, very proud to be representing the chief and the vice chief up here. I am the N9, I'm the requirements officer for the Navy. And vice chief sat here last year and said, going forward, we need to arrest the readiness decline, we need to stabilize our accounts, and we need to improve our accelerated acquisition. I think we have set a trajectory on that, a strong trajectory on that. It's been galvanized through our battle cry through the last budget cycle of readiness first, then capability, and then capacity. Readiness, we just poured a ton of money into that over the last two cycles, 17 and 18. We're going to continue that through 19. Capability is where we would really like to put most of our energy. That's where we can turn capability and make our fleet more lethal much more quickly than just building capacity. And then there's the capacity piece, the 355 ship Navy, I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I would caution everybody that 355 is a target. It's much more important to be focused on the sum of the parts. It's a derived number. Through O-plan analysis, studies, we determine how much of each type of ship we need, add them up, and it comes up to 355. So the sum of the parts is way more important than that actual target number. The national security strategy, the national defense strategy, both come out very aligned with a maritime force, very aligned with an away game mentality, which our Navy has been employing literally since the War of 1812. I don't see us coming off that strategy. Through those strategies, the CNO has added 3 more areas in addition to the readiness, capability, and capacity, also the personnel piece, the network piece, and ConOps. We're doing more with our Navy, being more creative with our Navy, and you'll see these words repeated probably throughout the symposium on the importance of being adaptable, agile, composable, decomposable, the things that make the U.S. Navy strong and that leverage our sailors that are out there 24/7, 365 days a year, far more than any other Navy in the world. That leads into the enablers, which are essentially the themes of this symposium of learning, competing, and winning. I think those are intrinsic to American DNA, so it should not be too hard to leverage those. Very important to the Vice Chief and the Secretary of the Navy. And with that, I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you. Admiral, you mentioned the away game mentality, and this new national security strategy brings it in spades. It introduces a new concept of deterrence, which, as you know, is deterrence in denial, which essentially means that instead of promising an adversary that if they do something, you're going to hit back, it says we're going to make it so that you can't even do that thing because we're going to hit you before you can do it. This is a big change. I'd love to hear from each of you gentlemen what this means. How does your service have to change to meet this new concept of deterrence?
Well, I'll start since you're looking at me.
Sure.
I defer to the 4 stars.
Well played. Look, the National Defense Strategy is pretty specific on the Marine Corps. We're in contact, we're forward deployed with our Navy partners, and we're the contact force and the blunt force by space and time. For the deterrence piece, it's important that our potential adversaries will know we have the capability, they see it, it's not kept in a closet back in the United States, and they know we have the will to employ it, and that, I believe, is what the real deterrence will be. And the presence part, I think, is critical for them to understand that, because there's some adversaries around the world that if it's not there, they don't see it, they don't believe it, and if they don't believe it, then it's really not a deterrent. And that might cause them to have a strategy or an outlook that, well, let me test it. We don't ever want them to test it. We want them to know that it's there. And that's where the readiness supports the presence. And it means that we have the right people trained the right way who will always perform, and to be strategically predictable but operationally unpredictable. I think you've heard the Secretary of Defense say that, and that's an important component of the NDS, I believe.
I think from a Coast Guard perspective, the national security strategy's recognition of this area of gray warfare or hybrid warfare, asymmetric warfare, plays a lot in the wheelhouses of not only the United States Coast Guard, but the world's Coast Guard. And I'll just give you kind of an example of that. So in the South China Sea, you're seeing China coming forward with, sometimes with its Navy, but lots of times with its Coast Guard. And it has some massive ships in the China Coast Guard. And the way that it employs those ships as an exercise of state sovereignty while still having a racing stripe on the side and a nice white hull and the optic that goes along with that, I think is a kind of a different way of projecting national power. And for those of you who follow the China Coast Guard, just here recently, the China Coast Guard was rolled out of the State Oceanic Administration and is now in the defense establishment of China. And we're going to have to see how they continue to employ their Coast Guard, because it begins to take on attributes of the United States Coast Guard, which is an armed force, part of the joint team that we bring into the fight, but also a humanitarian agency, a law enforcement agency, and a bunch of other things. So we're going to have to see how these Coast Guards of the world, in my opinion, are becoming increasingly relevant, because states are finding them very useful to use for assertion of national sovereignty. And we're going to have to get our arms around that concept. We in the United States Coast Guard are proud to be part of the joint team and provide that toolkit to the United States of America of this asymmetric force who can also operate and interoperate with the symmetric forces. So that's something that I'm glad that the national security strategy recognized and we're planning for.
Admiral, you want to?
Yes, sir. So the themes out of both these strategies, come out of the gate with Homeland Defense, and so our efforts to recapitalize the Ohio-class submarine, the Columbia-class, as the other services are recapitalizing the other two legs of the strategic triad, the only existential threat fundamental to our Homeland Defense. It also gets to the capacity portion of how we derived our 355-ship Navy. Although we're focusing on capability to make sure we have the right lethality now for the size Navy we have, the size Navy is still too small, and that won't fix that. To be in all the places we have to be to have that visual deterrence and the enforcement of international law. So I think we're very aligned with all elements. The commitment over time to get there, time will tell. I'm often asked, is it enough money? Are we going to be able to continue to grow this Navy over time? And it really just comes down to our relationship with Congress, the recognition you can't fix this quickly, you can't build this Navy overnight, and that commitment over time is what will make these strategies actually effective.
So let me press you just a little bit on what needs to change. General, I heard that one thing that needs to change is to let our adversaries know what we're capable of. Do more presence, talk more about it, make sure they know. It seems though that deterrence and denial requires new specific capabilities. You need faster global strike, for example. You need, to your point, Admiral, you need presence. There's no replacing just sheer numbers of gray hulls. But what else needs to change? It seems like this is a big deal, and it's not something that we can tackle the old way we were thinking about it up till last year. It's a new concept. We need to do something different.
Yeah, so that's the Admiral said it. I mean, it's one thing to get the technology and the people, but then if you don't have the ConOps, and that's where the work has to happen in the very near future, and it's ongoing right now. If you don't have a good concept of operations on how you're going to employ these things, these new capabilities, then you just have a bunch of new capabilities. I think, and then that goes back to training and how do you train to it? Because once you get a concept, we're pretty good at building things, and we're good at training. but when we get new things into the training pipeline, I really do. I believe the young people that are serving out there as our junior officers and our senior enlisted, they're innovative. Once you give them the ConOps and the capabilities, let them start training to it, and you'll be surprised where it goes. I've seen that time and time again as we've provided new things to the sailors and the Marines. I mean, they'll find things that'll accomplish their mission a lot quicker than someone in the Pentagon sitting down with a yellow pad and a pencil could do.
All right.
I'd like to just add that, I quickly mentioned the three focus areas the CNO has added, and one was the ConOps, but that's probably the area we spend the most time discussing. And I entirely agree with General Walters that the talent out there is eye-watering. And we've had some operational challenges over the last year. We're coming through that, as we always do, and we're setting down a foundation to make sure the training is in place and the certification and maintenance is all in place. Then we just need to let them run. This proficiency at sea that I mentioned in the opening remarks is absolutely fundamental to our success, and it's also our fundamental advantage. Proficiency is not something you can fake, emulate, steal. You can steal technology, you can watch how we operate, but the experience and the proficiency of our force is something you just have to earn every single day. And that recognition coming through this last 15 years of what we call kind of the lazy period of acquisition and operations, we need to get back to that and really leverage what our strengths are, and it is our officers and enlisted out there operating the fleet and making sure that they have the tools to do that. And I think most would agree we took our eye off the ball on that for a little while, but we're back and we're leaning into it, and we're going to make sure they have what they need.
All right. So you referenced the collisions of last year, if obliquely, and the need to get back to basics and build up proficiency. Another part of that, though indeterminately connected to the collisions, is the idea that the Navy in particular, everybody also, has been run ragged. Too few units doing too much stuff. Right. And Vice Admiral Moran has said that sometimes the Navy can be its own worst enemy in saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. And even SECNAV has said that the Navy needs to build a culture where sometimes it is acceptable to say no. How's that going?
How's it going?
How's that going?
No. You hit on a very fundamental cultural point. We've rallied the entire Navy around these collisions. I mean, we lost 17 sailors, and that has to stop. We have an oversight council actually led by Admiral Moran and the Undersecretary of the Navy. There is a three-star group underneath that led by the Director of the Navy Staff, of which I'm a part of, and as the other DCNOs. But the focus is making sure the leadership decisions are made at the right level. Those closest to the problem are empowered to say no if they need to. We've always been a can-do Navy, and that comes with some risk when the expectation is that you do regardless and at all cost. And these folks out there won't let you down. So it's inherent on us to create an environment that they understand that there's two sides of that equation, and if you're not ready to go, you need to say so. And I think we have many examples of that, particularly over the last year as we've opened this aperture up to have these very frank discussions, particularly at the commander, the 05 level, the CEOs of the ships, the CEOs of the submarines, the CEO of the aviation squadrons. They're the ones that have their finger on the pulse, and they're the ones that are being the most vocal as enabled by the leadership. And we're probably learning more from them than any collective group in the Navy. So you can just feel the discussions are healthy. They're eager to perform. They're eager to have this freedom, to have these frank conversations of where they stand, and they're eager to get the help that we're providing through these efforts in the wake of the collisions. So if there's any silver lining to this, I think it was a tremendous reset for how we go about our business. And I truly believe after doing this for well over 30 years, it is probably the most fresh operational vector I've seen since I've been in the Navy.
All right. One more question for you, Admiral Merz, and then I'll move on down the line. The concept of deterral and the new deterrence concept seems to, as I said, need a new kind of strike. Naval aviation, the future of it is at least more unmanned, and that promises at least to extend the reach, to push out the enemy, to do better with AD challenges, that sort of thing. But the Navy's efforts on that seem to be going backwards. The Stingray, the aerial tanker, the unmanned aerial tanker, has been delayed. Some promising experiments in unmanned combat air vehicles from a few years ago don't seem to be going anywhere. What's the state of the future unmanned air wing?
So you're familiar with the MQ-25?
Yeah,
Obviously,
right.
you just mentioned that. So the MQ-25 is actually under our accelerated acquisition umbrella. And it's tough technology. I mean, there's three just major elements to that aircraft. You know, one is just flying it, one is communicating with it, and one is bringing it back aboard the ship. I think that is a very positive step in extending the reach of the air wing. You know, we're investing in what we call the NGAD, the Next Generation Air Dominance, which may or may not be a manned aircraft. It'll probably be some collection of manned and unmanned as we go forward. And the unmanned is just not in the air, although we do have the Triton. We're also looking undersea, we're looking on the sea, and how these things can work together to create an unmanned effect. Sometimes you'll hear the term ghost fleet. We think there will always be a man in the loop somewhere to help manage this collection of capabilities, but it's absolutely intrinsic to how we're going forward. As far as the carrier air wing is concerned, we do get a lot of questions about the viability, the survivability. We feel very comfortable with our air wing, with the capabilities we bring and the capabilities we're investing in going forward. As we look to bring in the F-35, we'll have at least one squadron per air wing in the 20s, and then we'll hit our balance of 2 squadrons per air wing in the early to mid-30s. And I think that is going to be very informative on how we piece this together going forward with the unmanned air fleet. So we have a lot of moving parts right now. I think they're all high potential initiatives, and I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface of the collective capability as we start piecing these things together.
Okay, thanks. General, sticking on aviation for a sec, the Marine Corps have a very big change of concept of operations coming up with the America and the Tripoli, the aviation-only amphibs. America, of course, has gone on deployment, came back, it was kind of quiet. It wasn't talking much about those capabilities. Can you bring us up to date on what how America did, what the CONOPS are for these amphibs going forward?
So I mean, the one thing about CONOPS right now is that when we send our ARGs out, if you would asked any Marine general 10, 15 years ago, and you say, well, we're going to split the ARG up, and we're going to send this one in the Red Sea, this one in the Med, we would have started disemboweling ourselves at the table. But that's the reality, and it's reality because the Navy doesn't have enough ships. So you have to change what each of those are doing. What capabilities you have on all those ships so they can operate independently. And it also causes us to look at how we man, how we train, and what capabilities we put on each of those ships so that they're very, very powerful when you aggregate them. But only portions of that capability are realized when you split them up, and that's a National Command decision. Now, what are we doing? We just put an RFP out for an unmanned UAV that'll go off of a amphibious ship. We also want it to be able to operate ashore. Unmanned is one of those places we see as a growth industry. Right now in the Marine Corps, every squad leader, sergeant, is going to have his own small UAV. Look around the corner, look around the building, look around the hill. Gives them so much SA. How do we double down on that? How do we get them to make their own? We have 3D printers out there, and Marines will crash these little quadcopters. But the good news is they go back and they just print the little parts again, put the motor back in, and they're doing that, and they're doing that now. Unmanned ground, we're trying to get lighter on the battlefield. One way to get lighter is if you look at, well, we take less stuff, okay? We never seem to take less stuff. So do we have something that can carry our stuff for us? And how we organize. I think you'll see the fundamental composition of the Marine Rifle Squad will change in this year. All these things are because the world is presenting a different thing to us. We're doing a lot on additive manufacturing because we know that the distances in particularly in the Pacific Theater, you got to move stuff a long way. If we can make it when we get there, that's what I think you heard today in the breakfast. We just built the shelters and concrete shelters out of 3D printing. We had a young sergeant, innovative sergeant out of 1st Maintenance Battalion, had 8 M1A1 tanks deadline for an impeller. And let me see if I can remember the right, 18 months to deliver from DLA, $1,800 a piece. She found a company, and they might be sitting out here, so I'm not going to give you a political plug right now. But she found a company that would 3D print these in metal impellers for these tanks, and she delivered all 7 in 7 days. So there's 7 tanks we weren't going to be able, or 8 tanks we weren't going to be able to use for 18 months, and now within a week they're all back up. That's the innovation we seek. That's when and we need industry's help on this because obviously when you talk about aviation, there's a different set of circumstances on when you can put parts on an aircraft, but there's a lot of opportunity out there, and we seek those. In fact, tomorrow I'm going down to NAVAIR to see how they're doing with accelerating our printing of parts for our aircraft. And there's a lot of challenges there. We just got to work through them. We got to work through them with industry, but we'll get there.
So you're giving everybody a quadcopter. Are you going to give every squad a 3D printer as well?
They're down to the battalion level right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. What we did was we just put a couple out there. I mean, I'm talking about the little, $1,000 print stuff in plastic. You get the troops playing with that stuff. The troops now are tech savvy. They don't know it, but they're a lot more tech savvy, and I'll venture to say than anybody sitting on this podium up here. And the next thing you know, they'll say, we gave it to one squadron, bought their own, and now they're printing little buttons that go on in the aircraft, the circuit breaker buttons and little switches that always seem to break, the plastic switches that you have to wait 4 or 5 weeks for. Well, these guys are just printing them. Next thing we got to do is get them a scanner so they can scan this stuff. So they don't have to go out there and scan the broken part and put it together. They go into their database, there it is. That's the innovation, and that'll cut down a lot of downtime, recovery readiness, and it really gets the young people involved in the mission of the Marine Corps. And I know they have 3D printers on ships. 3 years ago I didn't think you could do that because ships tend to roll around a little bit. I noticed that when I was on them. I didn't know how a 3D printer would react to the motion, but apparently they've solved it. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't anybody in the Pentagon that solved it. I'm pretty sure it's someone on a ship in that supply department. They solved it. So.
All right. Thanks, General. Admiral, you mentioned the icebreaker, the big heavy icebreaker. The Coast Guard's on record, of course, of saying it needs 3 of those and 3 medium icebreakers, and yet we're talking about 1. There seems to be more of a climate on Capitol Hill that's accepting of block buys. Obviously, the Navy's buying 2 aircraft carriers. Is the Coast Guard missing an opportunity, not asking for a block buy of icebreakers now?
Well, I think you're right. We sort of haven't formally asked, but we've been in active discussion with the Congress here for a long time on the procurement strategy for the heavy icebreakers. And block buys have been kind of right in the middle of that discussion. First of all, the Coast Guard would need legislative authority to actually execute a block buy, and we have not gotten that, and we haven't formally asked for it to this point. But like I said, I think we're open to the discussion. It makes a lot of sense for us. First of all, you mentioned about 1. We may actually be in a little bit better shape than that. So in FY17, there was $150 million in the SCN account. FY18, another $150 million. And then in the 19 budget agreement, and this has not been appropriated yet, but we're hopeful, there's $750 million in there. And that's, you add all those numbers together, that's actually more than the projected cost of the first icebreaker. So we're hopeful that maybe if that appropriation is made, that's a good signal that there's the second, and maybe the third will be on the way. How to procure those things? I mean, block buys are interesting. They provide certainty to the industry. They provide a lot of appetite to the industry in order to do this. But it cuts against Congress's desire typically to appropriate year to year, and it commits out your appropriations, and the requirements and stability to design have been part of the discussion too. You know, we haven't built a heavy icebreaker in this country since the 1970s. Polar Sea and Polar Star were the last one. The reality of it is our industrial base in this area has not only atrophied, it's just vanished. And almost all the cutting-edge ice-breaking techniques are foreign. And I think we've got reps from Finland here. Finland, their ice-breaking technology is just absolutely amazing, what they've done with hull forms and azipods and bubbler systems and a bunch of other things. So what you've got here is you've got probably a classic balance in a block buy discussion of providing the good parts of the block buy, providing that certainty and providing that appetite to industry going forward against requirements and the stability requirements and the committing about your appropriations. So it's an active discussion between the Coast Guard and our authorizers and appropriators. I'm hopeful that at the end of the day we'll come up with a good solution, but it's actually under active discussion as we speak. So
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Question for everybody, and this might be our last question before we open it up to yours, so please get yours ready. Let's talk a little bit about hybrid war, gray zone warfare, this strange new world we've entered where now you have to think about more than kinetics. You have to think about your own information operators and how you can synchronize their actions, offensive and defensive. I know it's a problem that we've been working more and more intensively, and of course EW goes back decades, but it is rising now in the public consciousness. I think everybody is getting more sophisticated, and it's a game that more than just people in uniform play. You know, adversaries are putting together teams of, folks in hoodies who are sitting in their special, basements sending out hacking messages. From where you guys sit, what are the major challenges of this year? What is changing this year that we should be looking for? Yeah, please.
I'll jump on that one first because it's an acute issue with a basically civilian-supported logistics system, and that goes for across DoD. Most of the stuff in DoD is carried by civilian carriers who aren't guarded behind a SIPRNet firewall. They're pretty much out there, and yet they're interfacing with our systems, which leads to some pretty significant vulnerabilities. And we've seen just last year on the shipping side, Maersk Lines, was infiltrated, and that's one of the top end shipping companies. Not Maersk Line Limited, the U.S. firm, but Maersk, big Maersk. To the tune of $300 million worth of damage. Shut down a lot of their ports around the world, just solid. Now, if we were in process of mobilizing and needing to move a bunch of forces overseas, that would have taken us down to Parade Rest. And it's not an easily solved problem. The problem is a lot of civilian companies think they have really good cybersecurity and they've paid a lot of money and have a lot of people that have told them, yep, you're good to go. And yet, on the classified side, we see holes being punched in it every day. So it's a significant problem. And an adversary, in order to slow down our logistics chain, doesn't have to expend any kinetics. Just do a couple of well-placed cyber attacks just to slow us down. You slow us down, and you have accomplished your mission.
So, Admiral, from where you sit, is there anything you can do to get these companies' cyber defenses up to snuff?
I think awareness is, the big thing. When I was, before this job, still over at NDTA, National Defense Transportation Association, we were working with Transcom, and I know they still are, to set up an information sharing regime so that, if anybody sees an attack or sees something out of the ordinary, they can immediately share it with everybody else. And then basically a fight-through capability. How do we fall back to a level where we can continue to move the goods, do the mission, in spite of potential attack that's going on. And for many people, that's literally, and I talked to some of the Maersk people at terminals, literally going back to the yellow, legal pad and checking off containers as they were coming off the ship. I mean, it was to that level that they had to fight through, and we need to kind of, I think, get that level of awareness and acknowledgement by not just the ocean carriers, but the truckers, air carriers, rail folks, everybody that carries DoD cargo. Everybody's in it.
It reminds me of the challenge your colleagues here have in making sure that their troops can do land nav, and folks know how to navigate on a bridge without a sextant, or without GPS rather. Anyway, Admiral, would you?
Yeah, if I can weigh in here. So the Coast Guard's got a lot of roles here in cybersecurity for the marine transportation system. So the Maritime Transportation Security Act, which was passed in the wake of September 11th, gives the Coast Guard authority to regulate waterfront facilities and shipping to prevent what are called transportation security incidents. And the beauty of that law, it was written in such a way that those transportation security incidents can emanate from anywhere. And that includes not only the physical world, but also cyber. So they were very visionary when they passed that law. Now, after September 11th, the Coast Guard required facility security plans for waterfront facilities and also for ships that provided physical security standards. So this is badging, cameras, fencing, those type of things. But we actually have a draft, what's called a navigation vessel inspection circular on the streets right now for the cybersecurity aspects of a vessel or facility security plan. So it lays out kind of all our authorities and how we make things happen. Whether we'll come down to a command and control area in cyber is an interesting question. From a regulatory standpoint, we'll have to see how the process evolves, but right now we're using what are called our area maritime security committees. Those exist at every captain of the port who's designated the Federal Maritime Security Coordinator for that captain of the port region, and they bring together all the maritime partners in a particular port or series of ports together, and they serve as a node for not only information sharing, but best practices, innovation, and a bunch of other things. It's really kind of a unique thing that the Coast Guard brings to the fight in the world of cyber. As a matter of fact, I'd say in the United States, it's a best of class for that transportation node, the marine transportation node, which is intermodal, international, just in time, very economically challenged part of the industry, and we think we've got actual real solutions there on how to provide basic levels of cybersecurity for the marine transportation system. So thanks.
General?
Well, look, as we look at cyber and information operations, that's one of our lines of effort, and we're building a force called Force 2025, and we're doubling down and increasing our sessions and retention of those people. I think you're going to find it's harder to retain them, so we have to look at some lateral sessions. I think in the end vision would be looking for man-machine and artificial intelligence. I mean, those things that will protect our networks. And the last backstop is if we rely on our networks, and we do, to conduct our operations and win the nation's wars, then we have to be able to operate without them. Every time I see a new technology that promises an advantage, I've got a little more savvy, and I'll say, what's the defense against that technology? Because if we got it now, someone else is going to have it shortly thereafter if they don't have it already. All of that in the OODA loop kind of way has to be evaluated every time you make a decision on what to do and how to organize.
All right. And Admiral?
Yeah, I'll just pick up on several of these comments, starting with the OODA reference. Everybody's going to be able to do the first O. Everybody already kind of does it. The orient and decide piece is where the enablers like artificial intelligence, we're really looking for some breakthrough technology. Our commitment to this is significant. 8 years ago when we combined several of our commands into Fleet Cyber Command with the associated operational arm of 10th Fleet under Vice Admiral Gilday, the charter was to conduct cyber operations in that space. And everything that's digital, we're concerned with. So integrating this in all elements of the Navy operations, Navy acquisition, and procurement has been a driver for Admiral Gilday and 10th Fleet over the last really since its inception. And we've grown that fleet now to, well, the whole cyber command, we're up to 16,000 people now, our hoodies, that are committed to operating in cyberspace. We get attacked daily, so under that vernacular, we're already at war in the cyber domain. And there's a lot of elements to that. I won't go into details, but there's the recognition you're being attacked, there's the defense of the attack, there's the resiliency to survive the attack if it gets through, and then there's the healing process. Can you heal faster than the attacker can? And then there's our own offensive and defensive measures within that realm. So a lot going on in cyberspace. We're very committed to it. We work very closely with the other services, certainly the other maritime components. But it's pretty much mainline now in just about every operational area.
Admiral, since you and the General both brought it up, let me ask you one more thing about cyber personnel. And folks, raise your hand and somebody will bring a microphone to you and you'll be up next. Difficulty for the recruiting, difficulty with retaining, of course, because you've got industry's giant sucking sound out here. How's that going? You've got 16,000 people. Are they all looking to stay in and support the mission, or looking to get out and get what they can, or?
It's an individual
Yeah.
decision on each and every one.
Yeah.
We have to incentivize them. I think we'll eventually end up, much like we do as we train pilots. You get out of flight school, you get your wings, you sign a little piece of paper. Some of us didn't even know we're signing it. You're signing up for X number of years. That's what's going to happen with our cyber operators, particularly if they get through level 4 of the riot training. They're going to be like a pilot. They're going to sign up for X number of years. So it's how we incentivize civilians, how do we move people in, and then the contractor piece on the end. Those three are going to give us the capacity we need. But it's something to look at every day. We now have a talent management of the Marine Corps. It's me. And this is a thing we talk about every month at our talent management meetings. And it's a challenge for everybody.
All right. Yeah, very similar. These kids are kind of doing what they love. Only they're getting a paycheck and they get a health benefit, as opposed to your basement, potential hacker. It's an ongoing war for talent. If you've listened to Admiral Burke, he makes a very compelling case for the small percent that qualifies, and then the small percent that we're allowed to compete for versus the other services, and they're in that group. Supremely talented individuals, very creative, and harvesting that talent is the challenge. That General Walters just laid out. But so far, we've been able to find the people we need. They've just continued to impress us with their capabilities, and I think they're leading the charge.
All right. Okay, let's open it to the floor. Do we have microphones and questions?
Over here.
Good.
Megan Eckstein with U.S. Naval Institute News. Question for General Walters and Admiral Mers. The last month, we've seen a spike in aviation fatalities. I think we're up to almost 20 for the past month. And I know each of the incidences are still being investigated, but I wondered if there's any conversations happening now about kind of lessons that can be learned, any ways that you can provide money in a different way for training or readiness or other issues that may help prevent something like this going forward.
So I'll help you out here and go first.
I'm the submariner, so
Yeah.
or the aviator.
No. Yes. Do we talk about it? We talk about it every day. Obviously, you don't want to react too quickly until you have some root causes in there. Aviation safety has always been the number one focus in the aviation arm, both in the Navy and the Marine Corps. Because if you do what the enemy's going to try and do to you, and you do it to yourself, then you're not advancing. Each mishap is a little bit different. Each has a different cause. And if you look at how we train and how we communicate with our aviators, the lessons learned, the very painful lessons learned on all these mishaps, make us change. And sometimes it's going back to the basics, which I think we will, and we have. Aviation, much like our ships, have been stressed over the last 15, 16 years as we utilize them 2 or 3 times what our planned utilization is going to be. A lot of it is getting new iron out there. A lot of it is providing time for our commanders and our pilots to practice the art of professional aviation. And that is where we can help. And we've actually said no to a few things where they wanted X number of aircraft to go this place in the world, and we said, nope, need to build the time, and we manage that at the wing and the MEF level.
There's that no, right?
Yeah.
So, on the Navy side of naval aviation, obviously that whole community and training structure is the same. We don't send aircraft out that are not ready to go, despite what you hear about some of the readiness challenges. What that means is our production is lower, not lower quality. So as the General said, these are still under investigation. We learn something from every mishap, whether it's a float under the sea or in the air. And I think we're pretty aggressive about drilling that back into the program.
All right. Next.
Good morning, Chris Barrett. Hey, it's not often that we're treated to the Merchant Marine song as the lead in the service medley, so heave-ho.
Heave-ho.
Probably even less often are we treated to having the Maritime Administrator, the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard, and the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for requirements on the stage together. We talked a little bit about culture as an issue being addressed in naval operations. Can you talk about any ongoing collaborative efforts to reinstill fundamentals of seamanship and surface warfare officer training, and then maybe use that as a launching point to talk about sailors to mariners transition for addressing some of the merchant marine shortages?
That's yours.
Roger that. The day after the Fitzgerald collision, Secretary Chow, my boss, called me up and said, how can we help? How can we help the Navy? And she called me again when John S. McCain, shortly thereafter had their issue, because she fundamentally knows that, we take a lot of pride in our training. The Coast Guard obviously works very closely overseeing how mariners are trained, and there's a standard, a very high standard that has, international, that we all abide by, all of us that are licensed officers. And there probably is a place in Navy training to inject that level of standard. I actually had the gang up at Kings Point take a look at our deck licensing program and to carve out a 5-week sort of course that's based on standards training, certification of watch standards, which is kind of the international standard, that we could transplant into basic surface warfare training at some level and some degree to kind of help that transition. The Navy has got that and is, I know, stirring a pot and figuring out what direction they ultimately want to go. We obviously are happy to help in any way we can. A lot of our licensed merchant marine officers are commissioned into the Navy, are strategic sea lift officers. That's their specialty, is going to sea. In their civilian jobs, that's what they typically do, is ship's officers at sea. So using that expertise base to help the Navy, we're all about it. The benefit, as you sort of mentioned, Chris, is kind of on the other end as naval officers transition out of active duty. We are looking to help, ease their transition to becoming commercial mariners as a means to help alleviate that 1,800 person shortage that I spoke to at the very beginning. So hopefully by increasing the level of seagoing professionalism while they're wearing the uniform and then having them potentially available to us should they decide to stay in a seagoing career afterwards, we think is a good thing. So, and we're all about it. So
the Navy has cast a pretty wide net following the collisions. The Secretary commissioned his strategic readiness review. The CNO commissioned the comprehensive readiness review that was conducted by Admiral Davidson at Fleet Forces Command. And collectively, between those two reports plus other inputs, we had probably 160, 170 recommendations that came down that covered all elements of of how we prepare our surface warriors. There are material solutions, ship construction, training pipelines, career pipelines. Everything is on the table, and I'm going to avoid specifics because we're going to make a comprehensive report next month. But everybody has been involved, and I'll tell you that those collisions were the indicator that we're at the breaking point on the stress in the fleet, and it's not just contained to the surface Navy. They had the Crucible event, but it gave us pause to look at all elements of the naval operations. We made reference to the aviation readiness, the attack submarine maintenance. Every component of the Navy is struggling under sustaining the operational pace in the resourcing environment we've been living through. So there's all elements of reducing operations, increasing resources, looking at the training, looking at the pipelines, leveraging trainers, leveraging gaming techniques, leveraging other services is all on the table. And we've learned a lot about ourselves as we go forward. And as I said earlier, the silver lining is the trajectory is very positive.
So if there's one statistic I can be most proud of working for Admiral Zukunft is during his almost 4-year tenure now, the Coast Guard has had no loss of life in an operational incident, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of. And I kind of knock on wood here because it's literally something you got to stay on top of every single day. And for a on-the-ground organization like the Coast Guard, number of small units all over the place, I mean, you just got to keep on top of it. As I'm getting ready to roll into my retirement, I guess I'm getting sage and wise here. I'm looking back over this 37 years I've been associated with the United States Coast Guard, and I began our career with the sinking of the Blackthorn and the sinking of the Cuyahoga right there when I first came into service, and a lot of Coast Guardsmen lost their lives during those particular incidents. But we took a lot of soul searching and a lot of corrective measures, and I think those have paid off in spades. And looking over almost this 4 decades of service, we're a much more professional organization. But I can tell you, the safety thing and basic seamanship, you just got to keep on it every single day. Got to keep on it, and basic airmanship, got to keep on it every single day. And I'm incredibly blessed, and I'm hopeful that during the rest of my tenure here with Admiral Zukunft for the next 6 weeks or so, we'll continue with that record. But it's one of the things I'm actually most proud of during my time serving with Admiral Zukunft.
All right, someone else?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank you for your service and your leadership. So my question this morning is regarding the future of the ranges. I'm Donna Adams. I'm with Strategic Systems Programs. So we're sister command to NAVSEA and NAVAIR Echelon 2. So we're one of the 3 legs in the triad with the Trident missile, so you can probably guess where my question is going. Yes. So the future of the ranges is my concern this morning. The Air Force is thinking of autonomous flight safety systems. So when I think about, and we spoke about UAVs this morning, but I'm also thinking about the ranges in a perspective of how we collect data to understand the performance and accuracy of our systems. However, I'm concerned about obsolescence. Most of our systems that are shore-based and on, like the MSC, MSS ship, they are surpassed their design life cycles, and they're still out there in the fleet. So I would like to know what is our obsolescence strategy going forward to ensure that these systems are not out there beyond their design life cycle. And I also have a second question if we have time.
Let's get that first one nailed down.
Thank you.
So the training and test ranges have essentially been neglected over the last 10, maybe even 20 years, and they were hard decisions are made every cycle, and they ended up being the bill payer. We do watch them very closely every year to see how long are they going to be able to hang on, particularly from the infrastructure side. And I think you'll see a fresh new investment coming to the ranges here especially in the 19 budget as we come around that. I was actually a resource sponsor in the last job as N97, and now as the N9. N94 is under the N9, and all the ranges are part of that lane. So we recognize the challenge. It was all in the blender of hard decisions to make, and we let some of them go a little too long. For the SSP ranges, you're often dealing with immense distances and highly complex weapon systems. So that is probably the area that's gotten the most attention up front. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the larger programs we've had to negotiate with OSD to make sure that if we can't use the range, we have other methods to test our systems. But you're exactly right, and I think the commitment's turning around, and you're going to see a little bit better performance on improving our ranges.
Great news. Thank you.
All right. Someone else?
Good morning, sirs. Thank you for your very enlightening comments. My name is Everett Hayes, and I'm with SUS Consulting. In the past few years, when we attended events like this, a lot of the conversation revolved around the fact of lack of resources that you had available to do things. Now that we have money to do things, and I've heard the term accelerated acquisition used a couple times. We always talk about speed acquisition and that kind of thing. Can you talk about some of the specific tools that you plan to employ to be able to execute the money that has been allocated to you? And also, can you kind of give us, the defense contractors, some hints on what you would like us to be smarter about in the world of accelerated acquisition?
All right, who wants that one?
Jeez, I'll give it a shot. So I'll just remind you, yes, we did get an appropriation, but we got the appropriation halfway through the fiscal year. So we got a larger appropriation in a shorter period of time. Congress also gave us some flexibilities, not all that we asked for on the Hill, but they gave us some. What can a contractor do? Have the contract ready and execute it on the timeline that you've contracted to. Where are we going in the future with accelerated acquisition? I believe that we will look at what do we have to know, and when do we have to know it, and what does the operational commander say about that capability? The combination of all those three might allow us to take, and as we get the service chiefs plugged into the chain of acquisition, to accept some risk in acquisition to deliver an operational capability. And you've heard it in the past, the 80% solution. The problem is, and I think my battle buddy here will admit it also, we don't have an 80% requirement. We don't generate an 80% requirement. And it's really up to the operational folks to decide what is 80%. And if you were in the breakfast this morning, I think Hondo Gertz said it very, very well. What's the risk of not putting something in the fleet when it could be better than what you already have? I'm not saying all the eggs go in the basket that way, but clearly there are some. And then you get insight from the operational folks using it. And if you have a spiral planned in the acquisition, then maybe the next spiral will actually get closer to what you exactly want, but it'll be influenced by the people who are actually going to use it. So those are some of the things that we're doing, and Secretary Gertz has a very good way ahead as we look at all of our acquisitions and how we're going to try and deliver those.
Yeah, I would add that, and this is really just stealing the remarks from Secretary Gertz this morning, that over the last 15 to 20 years, we've had the luxury of being risk averse, and we took advantage of that. And somehow that's been entrenched in our processes and our laws that he is working very diligently to break out of. And there has been signs of hope. the MQ-25, the Stingray. The delays we mentioned are, it's a negotiation with Congress, it's not the process. And Congress asked good questions, and we're coming through that, and we'll get that thing on track. We got the Helios laser on contract in less than a year. Typically a 3 to 5 year venture just to get it on contract. So he is making progress. But probably the area he's making the most impact is stratifying the process so it's not a one-size-fits-all. As he used, the process to buy an aircraft carrier should not be the same process to buy a pod on a UAV. So these are the elements we're coming through. The Accelerated Acquisition Board of Directors very much focuses on the relaxed authorities that we received in NDAA 16 that allows us to bypass some of the development and testing requirements based on the maturity of the technology. Again, breaking out of this one-size-fits-all. If you can take an element of one system and plug it into the other to create a whole new effect, we now have the ability to do that. So we're just getting going on this, and everybody's finding their way. We're doing a lot of conversations with Congress. They've been very supportive, from the members all the way through the professional staff members. So it looks like you're watching the inchworm crawl across the chart right now, but I think pretty soon that thing's going to grow legs, and we're going to get through this inflection point and be on our way. This is like a 3-beer discussion for me. I could go all night on accelerated acquisition, but I will tell you, we're cracking open, our entire R&D account on how do we move from the S&T phase to the actual development phase, often 2 different organizations, and we're finding that the whole contracting process has to be repeated all over again as we're marching through that. These are some, seemingly straightforward corrections we can make that are going to literally cut timelines in half. And this is where industry comes in. I have made this cry to industry many times in the past, and I get a lot of general comments back, but what I need is specific inputs on what is really slowing you down, because I don't know. I know it's an acquisition challenge, but if you can help me and help Secretary Gertz really identify these hurdles as you come across them, even if you don't know them up front, when you come across them, just feel empowered to let us know. Give us something we can chew on and take to the Hill and work through it.
All right. Gentlemen, want to add anything? Alcontish? Okay. Looks like we have time for 1, maybe 2 more questions. Oh, somebody out there? Yep.
Yes, good morning, sir. Thank you very much for a great panel. Link Smith, retired Navy surface warfare and also public affairs. And this question is, I think, directed at Admiral Merz. Sir, I think it was, if I've got my facts right, in 1995 that we closed Gitmo down as a place to practice. And I know there's a lot you can talk about, some things you can't. Would it be on the table that, along with all the simulation we're now doing, that we might get back to doing practice at Guantanamo Bay for the fleet?
That's an interesting question. I will tell you, my general response is everything's always on the table. Right now, just feeding off the previous question, we're focused on just shoring up the ranges we have today. And once we get through that, that certainly may be an option. What may also be an option is we've had some efforts going on the portable training ranges, things that we could set up where we need them in a spot of the ocean that makes sense. That's either a safe place to operate for the general maritime community for us to test, or it's a representative environment of a threat we're trying to emulate. I do not, I'll be honest with you, I do not know the details of why we moved away from Gitmo. We clearly still have a presence there. But I can get back to you on that.
All right, 1 more if we can make it short.
Otto Kreischer, Sea Power Magazine. This is for Admiral Busby. You talked about getting a new training ship. Well, Admiral Newburn at Sealift Command has pointed out that he's got some of the oldest ships still afloat. And he thought that there was some discussions about maybe buying a bunch of retired commercial ships and modifying them and put them into the Sealift Reserve Fleet. Is there anything really going forward to modernize your aged Sea Lift fleet?
Yes, sir. Good question. Thank you. The RRF, Ready Reserve Force, recapitalization effort really is a Navy, MARAD, Transcom sort of focus. Navy's lead because they got the money, but we're in close consultation, and it really, the program really is a three-tiered thing. We're going to take a look at, of those 46 ships, some that are capable of being slept out to 60 years. 60 is pretty much where we think is the drop-dead, gotta-go kind of point. So there are some of those that are candidates for that, and there actually is money already in the budget this year and next year to start doing that. Some of those ships, the second tier is to replace some of the really old ships with newer old ships, ships that we would take out of commercial service right now that are flying the U.S. flag, or foreign-built ships, bring them into the program. The Maritime Security Program, those ships age out at, I think it's 25 years, so that's still a much newer ship than the 43-year-old plus ships that I currently am running. So that's another major avenue. We have to get some congressional approval to do that, because currently the law says, to come into the Ready Reserve Force, it needs to be a U.S.-built ship. There aren't any U.S.-built ships suitable, really, to come into the program, so almost by definition, it's probably going to have to be a foreign-built ship to come in. Navy has authorization to purchase 2 of those as part of the FY18 NDAA. We think we'll be able to probably get some more of those soon. And then the third piece of it is to build new, a purpose-built ship that would not necessarily come directly into the RRF, but would probably flow into the Afloat Prepositioning Force, MPS fleets, and some of those ships, the LMSRs and other ships that are currently in the MPS fleet, would then flow into the RRF fleet. So idea was we would get a newer generation of ships into that fleet. But those are kind of the 3 pieces. It's been briefed to Congress already. They're kind of okay with it. We still got some more briefing to do. As I said, we're working closely with the Navy and with General McDow's staff out of Transcom to kind of start making that transition. The good thing is Congress recognizes it's an issue and that we got to get after it here straight away. I have the largest fleet of steamships in the world right now that I'm not really proud of, but I have them nonetheless, and they're great ships, but they are just getting long in the tooth, and every year by year they're getting more expensive to maintain, and quite frankly to find senior steam engineers that can still steam them safely. So thanks for the question.
All right, and that's where we have to end it. I want to thank everybody here for attending. Thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you everybody who's watching the live stream on Defense One, and especially thank you very much to you gentlemen for taking some time out of your very busy schedules to come talk to us. Enjoy the conference.